empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, 28 to 20 feet, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to Scoop World Order National Signing Day edition. Not quite the signing days that we're used to in the past. The great old times of National Signing Day in mid-February, or right around the beginning of February, used to be a national holiday. Now it is kind of just a nothing burger. Ohio State did not sign a single kid today, but they did bring all of their coaches out for interviews. Ryan Day had an interview, big press availability, a lot to digest today. A lot was said. A lot of somewhat eyebrow-raising things were said, so it's going to be interesting. I'm going to get into that with Bill Greene. We're going to break down some Peyton Pierce film, a guy that I think we're going to get now that James Laurinaitis is here. James is already on the warpath, and he is going to be a monster on the recruiting trail. With that being said, as always, we are thankful and grateful for you guys. Thank you guys as always. We are growing like crazy. Please click like on this video. That is huge. Click subscribe. Again, we appreciate you guys. We're hitting new benchmarks in most subscribers ever on this channel. So we appreciate you guys spending time with us. Get those chat questions fired up because we're going to bring in the very studious and my guy, Bill the Bank Greene. Bank, how are you tonight?
Good, man. Doing real well.
Real quick, I just maybe just a quick anecdote. Favorite signing day story from yesteryear. I know you probably have 10 million of them, but this used to be like the day, like people would call off work and be on the message boards, you know, having a glass of wine, eating some chicken tenders, whatever. Back in the day, this was a big time day. I remember signing on signing day in the middle of February. I had detention at Perry High School, the only one I ever had in my entire life. So I had detention that morning, nice and early. And I signed my letter of intent, went to Ohio State. It was fantastic. Any crazy signing day stuff? I mean, I know you've had some whoppers. I think of Dre Walker, which was a great one, the SC thing. But any really quick, funny signing day stories or good signing day stories you have from back in the day?
Yeah, the best one is the Andre Walker story. And I don't know if a lot of people may have never heard it before, but back in the day, Andre, I mean, we're probably going back how many years? 10 years now?
2011, yeah.
Wow, more than 10. And it seems like yesterday for me, but I was a fixture up at Glenville when they had, I mean, every year they had 10 D1 kids and usually 3 or 4 in the mix for Ohio State. And so I was up at Glenville. I think it was the day before signing day, kind of checking in with Teddy Ginn and his kids. And I saw Andre Walker, and Andre was, you know, he was in the mix of all those Teddy Ginns and Dante Whitners and all those guys. They all went to Ohio State. And, you know, so it was easy to go on the site and predict, hey, I got a hot prediction here, hot take, Teddy Ginn to Ohio State. You know, like, oh, okay, great. Dante Whitner to Ohio State's my prediction. Yeah, beautiful. Man, what great, yeah. So back in the day, there was some chatter that Andre Walker, you know, he visited USC, and there was some chatter, you know, that he could be going to USC. Mostly it came from him. And, you know, we went through that the year before with Marcus Hall. Marcus Hall would go on a official visit, and everyone knew he was going to Ohio State, and he hated that because he wanted suspense. So Marcus Hall would go visit Miami, and he would get a hold of, you know, and the big thing back then was, you know, as a recruiting reporter, is you had to track those kids down. Like the minute that official visit ended, you got to track them down, get the interview. Well, with Marcus Hall, he was calling us and saying, oh my God, Miami's the great. I've never seen anywhere like Miami. It's the most beautiful place. I love the, like, dude, we know you're going to Ohio State. No, I love Miami. Next week, LSU. I've never seen anything like, you know, this went on. And of course he went to Ohio State. We all predicted him to Ohio State. So I thought the same game was being played by Andre Walker. You know, it's what he does, you know, and he's a great kid, just so fun loving and everything. So I'm up at Glenville, and he kind of pulls me aside, like in the hallway by the drinking fountain, you know, and he's like, bro, you're my favorite reporter. He goes, don't say I told you, don't use my name, but bro, I'm going to USC and I want you to have it. He goes, you can put it out there. Just don't say you got it from me. I'm like, dude, shut up, man. I said, I know you're going to Ohio State. I said, don't play me like this. I said, I don't need this. I said, you're going to Ohio State. and you're going to have a great career there. You're a great kid. And I'm all, bro, he said, I'm telling you, you're my guy. He said, I'm going to USC. You put it out there. He said, but just don't say I told you. USC, you put it out there. He said, but just don't say I told you. I said, all right, buddy. So I went back, and made my predictions for the day. And I'm like, Andre Walker, 1,000% absolutely going to Ohio State. The biggest head fake ever, And so the next day, of course, he signs with USC. And like I never expected it, and he was texting me then, bro, I told you, I tried to help you. And I'm like, man, I messed up. I believed him. I didn't believe him. That's where, so I got that one wrong. And the guy did everything he could to help me get it right. And there was no way I could believe it. The Glenville kids that go to Ohio State, that's just, and especially it was a lot stronger back in that day than it is now, even though now when Ohio State recruits a Glenville kid, they're going to get them. But, Bryce West in, Witten in, but Andre Walker did his best to help me. And I just couldn't take the help. Couldn't believe it.
Is it ever hard for you because you've come up in the industry, you've been lied to by kids flat out. And, when you've got guys like Whitfong and Chad Simmons and these guys that you work with, and you kind of, it's like you kind of check your math homework answers against what they were hearing to see, am I crazy if if every single prediction and RPM and crystal ball is to Ohio State and you're the Looney Tune that goes SC, like, does it make it that much harder to be the guy out on a limb, even if a kid is telling you something crazy, like, hey, I'm trying to give you the scoop, I'm trying to make you the man? Like, is it better just to bite the bullet and lose with everybody else because everybody else blows it?
No. If I believed him and trusted him, I'd go with it. But I just couldn't believe it. A couple of years before that, there was a receiver. Remember, Cordell Scott.
Yeah, Illinois.
Yes. Yep. And he was another one, like all the predictions were to Ohio State, as they should be. But at the time, in Illinois had a guy on the staff, an O-line coach that recruited Ohio, and he was a great recruiter. He's now the O-line coach at Alabama, Eric Wolford. Wolf was great. He ended up being, I think he's the one that succeeded. No, he did not succeed Tress. Who succeeded Tress at YSU? I don't think it was Wolford.
Was it Haycock? Yeah.
Yeah, John Haycock, and Wolford succeeded him at YSU. And Eric was just a great guy that I had gotten to know back then. And here, everybody made their predictions, and it's Cordell Scott to Ohio State, automatic, Glenville. And Wolf called me like the night before signing day, and he goes, I'm telling you, I got Cordell Scott. I'm like, man, you ain't getting Cordell Scott. Wolf was on that team that beat Ohio State in the shoe, the Juice Williams team.
Oh, that was my senior day. That was my senior day. Thanks.
Who was their head coach?
Zucker.
Ron Zook. That's right. Okay, so Wolf worked for Zook, and Wolf said, dude, you don't know me that well. He said, but you know me well enough. He said, I'm not going to lead you astray. I don't want to hurt you. I'm telling you, we got Cordell Scott. And I thought, I'm going to go with this one just for the heck of it. I went against like you said, to go against the grain. And I went against the grain. And I said, Cordell Scott, and I got all the LOLs and the video and, Banks back drinking again. And, boom, it hit, and I was actually still working at Frito-Lay then, and just like a part-time, guy trying to make a name for myself in the business. And that was a bomb out of the sky, man. Old Coach Wolf, man, he helped me on that one. So
was that like 08, 09, 10 probably?
Actually, it was in that range. I think I started with Scout in 06, and I was part-time, I think, until 09. So it fell in that window. I was still working at Frito-Lay with a laptop and a cell phone, with me on my Frito-Lay route. So that was a bomb that, I was on the right side of.
Yeah, I mean that's true breaking information. That's not copying homework. When you get the call from the coach, who's the area coach, and he says, "Hey,
Yeah,
I got news for you." Even though Jim Tressel and Ted Ginn Sr. are literally best friends, he's not going to get this kid. I mean, that's a renegade move, and again, it's not a bad move because the kid can go wherever he wants to go. But when you go against the Ted Sr. and Tressel thing, it's like because Tressel would take he'd get Ted and Dante, but then he would take Curtis Terry and he would take Bryant
yeah.
Browning and he'd take like some 3-star guys to make up for the 5 stars and kind of help Ted
That was
Sr.
the
out a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you bring up that '07 Illinois team because they had, they beat us in the shoe. My last game ever in the horseshoe. I lost to Illinois, which sucked. And they had Vontae Davis, who was the best corner. I mean, he was top 10 pick. They had Mendenhall, who was really good, first round pick for the Steelers. Like, I mean, it was weird because like we never should have lost, obviously, but it wasn't like the garden variety Illinois team because they had like some real dudes. Because Zooker, I mean, he built that whole Florida team that whooped us, and then Urban took it over and won the title. And those are all his recruits that he won with, all those 3rd and 4th year guys. Yeah. And then at Illinois, he did the same thing. Like that guy is of all the guys that are great recruiters that I have respect for, like Ron Zook is at the top because he did it at like Illinois. Like it's easy. Like when someone says, "Oh, he's a great recruiter," but he's at Ohio State, I'm like, well, yeah, that's like a it's like stealing. It's so easy to do. But like when you're getting kids like Vontae Davis to go to Illinois, come on, I mean, what are you selling? They were 1-10 the year before, and then all of a sudden you get a top.
They threw a touchdown pass in that game to Brian Gamble, the Maslin.
Yes, Maslin kid. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many crazy stories, signing day stories, and they've ruined signing day by having 2 days. I mean, it's so sad for guys like me that remember the old days. I mean, literally, texts would start going off at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, and you had to be up, and you had to be at your desk by 5. I mean, you were late. 5 a.m., you were probably late. You're probably missing stuff at 5 a.m. But in the excitement the night before, like you couldn't sleep anyway. It was such we were all like pioneers back in those days, in the early days of Scout and Rivals. There was no 24/7 sports or On3, any of that stuff. It was just a different world, and signing day was the day. I can't imagine a day like today, signing day. I went and worked out, went to the store, and, wrote a little blog. But, it was just in the old days. I mean, I would have to have a calendar ready to go for radio interviews that I would commit to, and they went on all day. People would call, "Can I get you?" And it would be a radio interview from some radio station in Chicago and want to talk about 3 kids from Ohio, the Illinois side. And it's like, "Can we get you at noon?" I'm like, "No, I'm booked at noon." "How about 12:30? Nope, can't. And it was that way. I had a day calendar that was just filled. Go on the Fan in Columbus. Yeah. And it was just such a different day, and they've ruined it. And I hate it the way it is now. But I'll tell you another funny story. I don't know how long you want to do this, but
no, let's do it. I love it.
Back in the day, do you remember the linebacker? Do you remember Jordan Hicks?
Of course.
Jordan
Hicks. I remember Jordan Hicks. That was one of the great board meltdowns of all time, not getting Jordan Hicks.
He's down to Texas, Florida, and Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny because back then, you just didn't ever talk about your relationships with coaches. You had them, and you would just say a source, and we still do it today too. I don't name names, but when the name moves on, and then 10 years later, then we name names. So it was great because everybody's trying to figure out where that kid's going to go. And we knew he had really good relationships at Texas. Who was the coach, man? I can't remember the guy.
Muschamp.
Muschamp was his dude for sure. And Fickle was the linebacker coach at Ohio State. And everybody assumed he's an Ohio kid. He's going to go to Ohio State. And I remember, like, it came down to the wire, and I had gotten to know Luke, and he's still the best, to me.
Yeah.
And I remember texting Luke, like, how do you feel about Jordan Hicks? I'm like, what's your feeling? And he texts me back, I don't know. The kid doesn't really talk to me that much. And I thought, that's not a good sign, position coach. You know, and the kid had an announcement like at 4:00 in the afternoon on signing day. So at the time, I had some pretty good contacts at Florida. One being, Mr. Pan was over there.
Yeah.
Mark Pantoni was there, and I'd met some guys on that staff, and they didn't have a good feeling either about things. Well, I didn't know Will Muschamp, and I didn't know anybody at Texas, but I thought, man, it's true. If he's not talking to Luke, that's not a good sign. And if Urban and that crew aren't feeling very good, man, it might be Texas. Well, what happened was Jordan around noon called Florida and said, I'm going to Texas. He called Ohio State and said, I'm going to Texas. And I didn't know that, so I didn't really have a prediction at the time. I didn't know. I said, I think it's Texas is what I was saying. If he's not talking to Luke, he's not coming to Ohio State. Well, here around noon, I get a text, still have it on my phone, from a 614 number saying Jordan Hicks is absolutely going to Texas. Put it out, wreck the announcement. So I text back, who's this? And he texted back, don't worry, it's good. So I thought, man, who the heck is this guy, So I texted, I actually had texted Brett Getz, South Florida Express, SFE Brett. And I'm like, do you have this number? I'm going to give you a number. Do you have it in your phone? He goes, yeah, give it to me. So it's like 614, blah, 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 blah. He goes, are you playing games? And I'm like, no, why? Who is it? Do I know him? He goes, it's Jim Tressel.
I love
I'm
it.
like, holy crap. Tress wants me to wreck the announcement. So sure enough, I go out on scout.com at noon and said, Jordan Hicks going to Texas. Done deal. It's over, so yeah, those were the games that went on back then and nobody ever knew about. I mean, I didn't know Tress at the time. I didn't even know the guy, and I was fairly new in the business. And I mean, it was only a couple of years before that I had gotten like escorted out of camp. In the old days, the reporters were not allowed to go to camp, so, and I had gone down to Ohio State for, camp days because we could do interviews in the morning. We were allowed on the premise in the Woody until camp started. When the kids left the Woody and headed on the field, there was a big sign that said, no reporters past this point. Well, I went down, did my interviews before camp, and J.D. Brookhart, who was the head coach at Akron at the time, I said, hey, I got to get going. And he said, where are you going? Camp's starting. And I said, man, the reporters aren't allowed in. He goes, just hang out with me. He goes, they're not going to know who you are. You just started, because I really just started in the business, And he goes, nobody knows who you are. Just come with me. He goes, you can stay here all day for practice. I said, okay. So I walk out with J.D. Brookhart on the field, and it wasn't 5 minutes, man. Two of the Tress's gendarmes. God, who would they have been? The older guys.
Was it
sergeant of arms.
Was it Gillum or?
No, it wasn't Greg Gillum. It was, man, if you'd say the name, I would know it. But anyway.
Ken Canatzer, Bob Mansfield.
Oh, gosh, it was another guy, and I wish I could think of the name. Anyway,
older guy.
They come over to me. I'm standing there with the whole Akron staff blending in like I'm the special teams coach or something.
Yeah.
And two of Tress's posse grabbed me, and they said, hey, you're Bill Greene from Scout.com. You're not allowed to be here. And they escorted me out, and I was thinking, this is the greatest day of my life.
like I've made it.
Ohio State knows who I am, like this is unbelievable. Like, I was like Sally Field winning the Oscar, it was like, me, you really know me, and that was one of the highlights of my career, getting asked to leave camp because I was Bill Greene from Scout.com. I thought they'd think I was like an ant, like who would know me? So that was a thrill for me. Instead of being mad, they were like, don't be mad. We have to do this. I'm like, I'm not mad at all. I am not mad. This is like, I have goosebumps on my arms. This is the greatest day of my life.
It's just so funny because, like, what could you possibly have gleaned from watching those kids? I mean, you go to those camps now, and it's like it's the most boring, like
It
there might
wasn't
be.
that, but wait a minute, it wasn't that long ago. And I'm talking 2, 3, 4 years. In the last 3 years, we were not allowed to take any pictures at camp. We were
Oh
not
yeah,
allowed to do any video at camp.
yeah.
I mean, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, some people just start doing them. People start doing them. You know,
I
parents were doing them all the time. You know, so I would have parents that I knew that had kids that I'd say, take video of your kid and send it to me. And they'd be like, I didn't shoot it. You know, I had nothing to do with it. Now you can almost get into the drills now.
yeah.
You
It's
see that right there. I mean, you can talk to all the Ohio State coaches. You can, I mean, it's just a different game. And, you know, the young guy, which everybody's young compared to me, but the young guys in this business now have no idea what we went through back in the day.
oh
Because
god,
when Scout and Rivals first hit, the coaches looked at us like we were total nerds, you know, living in our mom's basements, and they wanted nothing to do with us. And then Urban was one of the first that realized, hey, we can use these guys. Give them a few morsels, give them a few nothings, and take a lot from them. You know, and then it got to the point where coaches would call us and say, hey, interview Kirk Barton. And when you're done with that interview, shut that recorder off and tell the kid, okay, lay the cards on the table here now. What are you really thinking? What do you want me to write? But tell me what's really going on. Because they didn't care about those interviews. They wanted to know everything that was said when the recorder was shut off. And then slowly but surely, these coaches realized how much of a help we can be to them.
oh,
But back in the day, I mean, we were pariahs. Like, they looked down on us. And it was, you know, it was the smaller schools, Akron's, and those schools, they knew how much, you know, we could help them. They figured it out before the big schools did. You know, so the Akron coaches would go to the Ohio State camp looking for the lower level kids, but then they would call me and tell me after camp, DJ Woods was amazing today. I think they're going to offer him. You know, they would tell me stuff like that, and then they would ask about that some kid at Maslin Perry that had a Kent State offer. It's so different now. I mean, it was. I mean, you had to do real espionage work back in the old days. Today you get things handed to you on a platter. And
oh god,
I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel today, but man, back in the old days, you know, you almost had to develop your relationships with guys that were, you know, the tight end coach at Miami of Ohio. You would develop and hope that he hit it big. You know what I mean? Like Luke was nobody when I met Luke Fickle. He was like a nobody.
oh yeah.
And then Luke climbed the ladder, and, you know, our relationship was good, and, you know, he was such a help to me. But man, it was so different in the old days. I mean, and I really do credit Urban Meyer with realizing how much, you know, the individual writers can help them in recruiting. So, you know, I can really remember Mark Pantoni being hired with Urban, and there I was out. I don't know. I think it was at the All-Star game, Under Armour or something, and I must have had 20 guys come up to me that were recruiting writers saying, "Hey man, I got Mark Pantoni's number if you need it." And I'm like, I already have it, but yet I thought I was the only guy that had it, you know, in America. That was not the case, you know. So, I mean, it's just the whole business has changed so dramatically, and like a lot of the espionage work is now gone in this business. And anybody that's been doing it more than 10 years knows what I'm talking about. I mean, it was probably more fun back in the day, but man, when you got something back in the day, it was like cherished information. You know, I mean, and it's so different today. It's just a different world today. You get things handed to you now.
I mean, because like back then, it's always funny to think that like you guys would have to like stand in the parking lots.
Yes.
Not allowed to watch the workout at all.
So no, we would leave and take our computers and go to Denny's or something and do what we could, and then head back over to the parking lot at 3:00 and hope the kid walked out where you were standing.
The back gate, yeah, and you
under
could grab
tree.
them and
under the tree.
Exactly. I know exactly. I can like visualize where you're at. It's not there anymore because they did the new building. The tree is now gone, but it's like you know, you guys gotta hope the kid comes out. You gotta hope the kid talks to you. You're gonna get a couple of quotes, a couple canned
Yeah.
quotes, but like you could get a good thorough evaluation. Like now you can go, you can watch, but now it's like you really need to go to. I mean, it's good to see the kids to see how big they are in person and stuff at camp. But like now, all the film is online, so that's
Yeah.
another huge thing that didn't exist back when you were coming
Right.
up 20 years ago. Is like now you can Google a kid and watch his entire highlight tape. And, you know, if you're tight with that coach, you can say, hey, can you send me a couple game tapes to watch? And how's
Oh,
that changed
it's
your
all
ability to evaluate?
everything's on Huddle now. I
Yeah.
mean, the highlight of one of the highlights back in the day was Ted Ginn sending me a DVD that he burned of all his kids. That was such a highlight to get high school coaches to send you, a DVD was out of this world. I mean, it was precious to have. It was so hard to get film. I mean, everything today is shooting fish in a barrel now.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to catch fish back in the old day with a little worm and a little pole.
With a
You know,
spear. You had a
you
spear
really
fish.
had you really had to work back in the
Yeah.
old days, man. And it's still great today, and there's still superstars in the business today, guys. I respect so much, but man, it's and I mean I know I sound like Bob Gibson saying how hard it was to pitch back in his day, and I'm the old guy talking about the old days, but I mean it was so different. That's the only way I could put it. It's very different.
Oh, I just think if you just talk about the access and the ability to see clips of kids online, like YouTube, Huddle, like that didn't exist 20 years
No,
ago. So I mean, you're
no,
just like if you don't go drive to the kid's practice or game, you have no idea what the kid can do. Then you have to get an evaluation. Then you have to, stand behind your evaluation. Like, because if you go watch a kid play in a game and he stinks, you might be like, oh, he's terrible, but you don't know he has the flu or he's hurt
right,
or something. And,
yeah.
but now it's
Well,
like you can watch 4 or 5 games. You can say, okay, this is it is who he is. And, like again, I always,
I had to call Ohio State one time, and I can't think what I had to call about. Something trivial that I had to call Tress's secretary, and it was nothing earth-shattering. I can't remember why I called, and she said, "Hang on one second, and I'll find out." And it was so trivial what I was calling about. Might have been like the time of Tress's press conference or something like that. What time is he going live? Is it 2? Is it 4? She's like, just a minute, I'll let you know. And she, instead of putting me on hold, she set the phone down. And behind her, I heard someone say, "Hey, get Tress. Philly Brown just committed." And that's so. So I wanted to hang up. I didn't even want to wait for the secretary to come back. She come back on the phone and said, like, "Hey, his press conference is going to be on signing day. It'll be at 4:00. Okay, thank you. Hung up on her, man, and went right to the computer. Philly Brown. I'm calling Philly Brown to Ohio State. And I heard it like over the phone. Like, if she'd have put me on hold, I'd have never got it. But she set the phone down, and I heard something in the background. Somebody saying, "Get Tress on the phone. Philly Brown's committing." So he just walked into stuff. Yeah, and I was the only one that had that because he hated Scout because of how we ranked him. He only talked to rivals. He didn't talk to Scout. And I just fell into that one. And it didn't get announced for like 3 days, I don't think, till after that, until he announced to the media. He was really weird how he handled the media. So that was one I just fell on,
That had been 09.
I was luckier than anybody. I mean, I was lucky back in the day. I have to admit, I was very lucky. And the way that I met, and I know we're rambling here. I don't know if anybody's interested in this stuff, but I was on my Frito-Lay truck one day and got a call from a Florida number. No one I recognized. I didn't recognize the number. And a guy said, "Hey, Travis Howard has just committed to Ohio State." And he said, "Travis just called me and told me to get." I didn't know who the person was calling me. Travis said for me to call you because he's busy right now on the phone with Tress, but he wanted you to have the information first because you're his favorite reporter and you've covered him so well. And I said, "Okay, thank you." And he said, "Go put it out. It's good." So I went and put it out. Hey, Travis Howard committed to Ohio State, breaking news, a source has told me all that. And then, later that night, I was the one that broke it. And I thought, I got to call this guy back and thank him. I didn't know who it was. And it was Brett Getz. He was calling me from, I think he worked for Merrill Lynch at the time. And that's how we developed that friendship. That was the start of a 15-year friendship. And how much he's helped me over the years is tremendously. We had a live thing going one year. Ryan Shazier was going to announce his choice on a Friday night. He had a private party. And I had Brett Getz at that private party just texting me all kind of information, like, what his mom was wearing. And he was sending me pictures and I was putting pictures online. We had a whole Friday night, almost like a chat going with the whole scout.com on there, and, I had it in advance. It was going to be Ohio State, but I was, we were going through what the whole party was for Ryan to announce, the color of the balloons. We had it all, the hats on the table, we had, the old days it's a blast still today. And I love the business, but the old days the things we did back then were just crazy. It was crazy. The espionage we had to use to get things done.
I got a great question in the chat. I got to put this on, Bank. You're going to have to go back. You're going to have to go back to the old days because this is going to be one of the all-timers. And you might not know the answer to it. What was the story behind Ben Martin? No one's. That was one of the all-time, like him, Fred Davis. There's certain names that, like in all-time Ohio State recruiting, Ben Martin is one of the top ones that are stunning.
Yeah, and I had him called to Ohio State too, and I think everybody did. And the word was that he was an early NIL winner back in those days. Prove it, and every time Ohio State didn't get someone, that was always the line, is that he got bought. And the reverse holds true today. When Michigan State or Michigan or Iowa doesn't get a kid that they're fighting Ohio State for, they go right on the website and say, Ohio State buys all their players anyway. We don't have a chance. They're dirty. They're this. So that was the common. But, I have reason to believe that, that might have been true.
Yeah, there were.
Because, I don't want to cast, I don't want to, that was a rumor. Put it that way.
I got you. Was that the most surprised you've ever been by?
Very surprised. And I was surprised he didn't end up a 10-year NFL All-Pro too, because he was amazing. He was Shamar Stewart-ish when I saw him.
Was he better than Ray Edwards?
I think so.
Because Ray was about 7-8 years and he got a big second deal.
Just an athlete. Ben Martin was just an athlete that you would watch and just you think there's no way this guy's not a superstar. But I think he did have some knee issues. I think early on. I think he had knee problems, but man, as a guy to watch work out, top. A+. Amazing.
That's amazing. Well, we'll do a little of the current day stuff. I love these, because I miss the old signing day. I think that the old signing day was just like, it's like people call off work, they're on the board all day, they're podcasting and talking about it. It's just like we don't. And again, last question I'll have about like kind of if you became the commissioner of major college football, not the NCAA, if you made like the NFL of college football, knows the SEC and the Big Ten, what would you do about signing days? Mark Pantoni mentioned that he would have a July 1st signing day because there's a bunch of, you do all those June official visits and for kids that want to lock it in before their senior year and not risk an injury. Like, is that what you would do?
Absolutely. That would be the right thing to do. I would probably have it earlier, but now they have summer visits. So, I guess you would wait till after the visits are over. And I'm surprised to hear Mark say that. I'm very surprised because the reason, they fought for an early signing day, around Thanksgiving. That's early. So they fought for that. But originally it was supposed to be for a kid to sign in June because there were no summer visits. This was, you didn't have to go through camps and risk, getting hurt in camp. And you had everything behind you before two-a-days and everything. So that was what they wanted. But the big schools, and I'm surprised because Mark's always been a big school guy, the big schools fought that to death because they wanted to be able to poach those kids.
Oh,
When
yeah.
little Jimmy signed with Akron in May or June, and then when they saw him in the summer, and it was like, holy crap, look at this kid. You know, he's 100 times better than what I saw on film. He's grown 2 inches. He's 20 pounds heavier. He's 2 ticks faster. He's 4'5" now instead of 4'7". Well, don't let him go to Akron, poach that guy. Or don't let him go to Purdue. You know, if the kid had signed with Indiana and then you saw him, it's like, man, I want that kid. They wanted to be able to poach him after their senior years. So the big schools fought that. They said, we'll give you an early signing day. We'll give you Thanksgiving. That's early. You know, so that was the whole story behind that. The Nick Sabans fought that. And I'm surprised to hear Mark say that because I've always felt that Ohio State and Florida, wherever he was at the time, I always thought they would be on the side of, you know, don't allow them to sign. Once they sign, then you can't poach them late in the game. You know, if you had a quarterback committed and then he decommitted on you, you know, well, you got to go find a quarterback. So you're going to go take Indiana's or take Kentucky's. You know, if they all signed early, you couldn't do that. So that's why I never thought, you know, the big schools would allow an early signing day.
Yeah, it's really curious because you know the impact it would have on a position like quarterback, for instance, where you know Ryan Day has been big on offering a guy like Jack Miller super early, and then he gets a guy like CJ Stroud kind of later in the cycle, or Quinn Ewers, which is extremely rare, a guy that reclassifies, and then they go out and get Devin Brown. Like if you have that July signing day, that guy's already signed to
Devin Brown would have signed somewhere else.
Yeah,
I'm sure
Utah or
CJ
wherever.
CJ would have as well.
Yeah.
You know, Ohio State got Dwayne Haskins after the All-Star game. I covered Dwayne Haskins in the Under Armour All-Star game, which is over early January, and Ohio State didn't get Dwayne Haskins until after that game. At that game, he was still either uncommitted or still committed to Maryland. I can't remember. But, you know, Ohio State at the time, like Jarrett Garantano, actually better than Dwayne Haskins, but Garantano ended up going to Tennessee. So that's how they got Dwayne. But if those kids had an early signing period and signed early, Dwayne. So that's how they got Dwayne. But if those kids had an early signing period and signed early, Dwayne would have signed with Maryland early. Absolutely, he would have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why when they went early, they compromised and said, we'll do it in November. There's no way we're letting those kids sign in May or June.
See, I think the biggest thing I would push back on with a July signing day that Mark proposed is that think about how much coaching transition goes on during the season and right after the season, like that Black Monday.
It's a chance the kid takes. I mean, and you know, we've seen guys sign. Mike Weber signs with Ohio State, and you know, Stan Drayton leaves Ohio State about 45 minutes after they get the signature. I mean, it happens. It's just part of sports. So
I know it's happened. All right. So Mark Pantoni today says that Ohio State may have to pull out of recruiting national prospects earlier if NIL is a driving force in their recruitments. I would love to. As soon as I read that, I was like, I got to get Bank on the phone and get this reaction because, you know, that's interesting. You know, he said that we're going to be more Midwest driven. What are your thoughts when you read something like that, Bank?
Well, I would disagree with that, and I don't know if that's him politicking to get more money, you know, into the NIL. I don't know. I mean, I'm surprised at that because Ohio State started to become a national recruiting program at the very end of Tressel's regime. I think Tress saw that his plan of taking the top 15 kids in Ohio every year and then you spread out and get what you can get, that just wasn't going to work anymore. And when Urban came in, the thing I love most about Urban is he didn't care about kids' addresses. Didn't matter. If you were a dog, I mean a dude at Dublin Kaufman, and he wanted you. But if the top line, he had his board. And if the top running back on his board was at Bosco in California, that's where he's going. And if it's at St. Thomas in Florida, that's where he's going. And I admired that. And that did elevate Ohio State when you started getting you didn't take the top 15 kids in Ohio automatically anymore. You might take 3 from Ohio. And, you know, to me, to be a national championship team, which I think is the goal at Ohio State, you need to have your board, quarterback, wide receiver, O-line, and you need to recruit your board and not worry about the address. You're, at the end of the day, you're freaking the Ohio State University, okay? You're not Purdue, you're not Indiana. Ohio State can go to Bosco. They can go to Texas. Obviously, we've seen that. You can go to Florida. You know, get your NIL program fixed is what I would say. I think Ohio State can be a leader in NIL, not just good, but great. And we've talked offline about how, and that's a whole show in its entirety. But I think Ohio State's NIL just needs, I don't think it needs thrown out and redone. I think it needs tweaked is the way I see it. So, but I hate to see Mark say that because, well, I just think you're eliminating your chances to win a national title, to be honest. I mean,
it's
you've only
tough.
got 2 in the last 20 years anyway. So, I mean, now you're knocking those odds down even further. You need the best players at every position. You need the best coaches at every single spot on your staff. And you don't have to pay kids up front. Do it. Look at what Nick Saban's doing. Look what Kirby Smart's doing. Listen to what they're saying about NIL. Okay? And I would do it that way. I think the A&M way, the Louisville way, the Miami way, I think it's wrong. I think when you're paying all these players up front, you're destroying your locker room, you're destroying your culture. So don't do it the A&M way at all. Don't do it the Miami way. Do it the Bama way. Do it the Georgia way. Do it the Ohio State way. Just tweak it a little bit. It doesn't have to be completely overhauled. I don't believe that from what people in the arena are telling me about NIL.
I agree.
That's just me.
Yeah, and the thing is that when a lot of these mid-year guys showed up to Ohio State, they got NIL deals. You know, like
Sure.
Jelani Thurman got an NIL deal, and he got
Great.
he got a new Charger that they're leasing for him, and they got an NIL deal. Like the first day he got here, like Ennis, the day Ennis gets here, he's getting an NIL check. So it's
all been explained. That has all been explained to him. You know, you're not going to find 2 bigger NIL kids in America than Tate and Ennis.
Uh-huh.
And did they sign with A&M? Did they sign with Miami? No.
Nope.
They signed with Ohio State. Is it because they don't like money? No. It's because it was explained to them their opportunities. And they talked. It was set up with Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and they were explained how development takes place here and the NIL opportunities that are absolutely there. See, Brandon Ennis right now cannot accept NIL money because he's still a high school student. School wouldn't let him out early. But there is I don't know how to word, there is a path that's already in place for him. And I talked to Brandon's dad just last Sunday, or Sunday before last. I talked to Brandon's dad down in Florida. He explained it perfectly to me, how NIL is going to work for Brandon. Made a lot of sense to me. Okay?
Right.
So that came right from the source. That is from the dad who was on recruiting trips to Bama. You know, he went to Bama. He heard the Bama NIL pitch. They went to USC. Heard the USC NIL pitch, which, you know, and they talked to the players, and those promises are not being met at USC. So, you know, the NIL, the whole NIL thing could be a house of cards that comes crumbling down when little Johnny gets promised the world, but he doesn't get what he thought he was going to get. So I still think the Ohio State way is the right way, fundamentally. But I just think the whole process needs tweaked. And, you know, I think they're close to where they need to be, but not quite where they need to be. And I'm not sure the NFL guys that could and should be giving back are doing that. And that's another 2-hour program that you would know more about than I would. But I don't think Ohio State's that far off with NIL at all. I don't think they are. I think they're close. I think the process needs tweaked, not thrown out and restarted. And that's probably
I agree.
the point to make. That's the point to make.
Yeah, it's like you said. It's not like Alabama and USC wouldn't empty the chamber to try to get Brandon Ennis because it's not like they have
But
wide receivers
they
on.
weren't offering, Alabama did not offer him upfront money. And Alabama needs receivers right now. They
Oh
need
yeah,
receivers. So Brandon, he was a high target of theirs. But Alabama recruited Brandon closer to the way Ohio State did rather than the way Miami did. So,
right.
that's, and this is from talking to a parent, not some internet bullcrap by, somebody that's hiding behind a screen name. This is someone in the arena. I spent a lot of time talking to Brandon's dad. And,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about Mark Fletcher. And, every kid's situation is different. And Brandon, his dad feels very good about Brandon's opportunities at Ohio State, but he also felt Mark Fletcher did the right thing taking the Miami opportunity. Every kid's different, every situation's different. But, when it comes to Tate and Ennis, their NIL path was laid out for them perfectly, and they got them.
Yep.
So lay
Yep.
it out
But
perfectly with everybody, and I still think Ohio State will be fine with NIL. I really do. I
I
hated to hear Mark D'Antoni say that. He's smarter than I'll ever be. He's the guy I respect most in the recruiting world. He's the best. He's the Tom Brady in his world of what he does. You know what I mean? He's the GOAT. Mark is the GOAT. So we'll see how it goes.
I know that this isn't possible because he has to do his job and there's only one of him. But if you ran the world, would you somehow figure out a way to find his equal to run the NIL collective for Ohio State?
In a minute. In a minute. Now, I was told that is what has happened at Georgia. I don't know that for a fact. So don't, I had someone tell me that I trust that is what Georgia has done. They have taken a guy who was the recruiting guy, and he's now in charge. He's now working with NIL. I can't swear to that. That's true. I don't know a name, but it makes sense to me. It's kind of the way I would do it. If I could
Yeah.
get Mark Pantoni's twin, Mark Pantoni's, clone, put him in charge of NIL. But, Mark is great at what he does. And again, I'm hesitant to criticize anything he says or anything he does because of, how much I respect him and what I think of him. And, I knew Mark back when he was at Florida. So, he's the best there is. So if he says something that, he's Merrill Lynch, when he speaks, people listen.
Yeah, he's earned his stripes, man. He came up and it's
Absolutely.
funny like when a guy creates a job that didn't exist, but he was
Right.
so
Right.
good at what he did because I remember when he walked in 2012 and like he looked at our recruiting board and it was like 25 names and he's used to having
It was,
1,000 names whatever.
this,
I was like he's
this
like
was,
is this it? And I was
yeah,
like yeah that's
this,
all we got this.
this was, you're now going from Orville and Wilbur Wright. You're now
Oh
going
god.
back. It's NASA. It's not Orville and Wilbur Wright trying to figure out how to
Oh
fly a plane. This is NASA taking you to the moon and back. So,
well, it
yeah,
was the worst part about that is I was one of the only guys that got retained. I was the only guy on offense that got retained other than Sam Drayton. So like they would look at me like I was just a GA. I was a grunt. So like they'd look at me like this is how you guys did things. I was like, hey, I'm a GA here. I don't have a lot of yank to get things done the way that you guys do it or the way that like the super sophisticated people in the SEC do it. So I literally back in the day with Tress when they would do recruiting meetings, like the GAs weren't in those. It was literally just the top, 9 coaches, Tressel and like Greg Gillum. Like, so like we weren't in those meetings. So like, I mean, I didn't know how big the board was, how small the board was, how sideways the board was. Like, it was just like a total mystery to me. So it was just funny because I was like, because then after that with Urban, like he wanted us at every meeting because he wanted us to evaluate just like the big coaches did. Like he would ask me my opinions on offensive linemen, even though I was a GA. He asked me about, we'd watch film on a guy, and then he'd ask Ed, and then he'd ask me, and then I'd explain what I thought and what I liked and who I liked at camp, and because he wanted you to have that that initiative where you're like, yeah, you actually your opinion, it doesn't hold a lot of value just because you're a grunt, you're a GA. But if you are right more often than you're wrong, if you're right, if you're really accurate, then he's gonna really trust your opinion. So it was good stuff. Well, we're gonna talk about Peyton Pierce. So great little blurb from one of the Notre Dame websites talked about Peyton's admiration for James Laurinaitis, the relationship that they built at Notre Dame. And again, James is a guy that I was a captain with. I've known him forever. I'm one of his biggest fans, advocates, whatever you want to say. I think he's going to be a head coach sooner than later, which I know that's people think it's putting the cart before the horse. He's just a GA, but I know the kid. I know his drive, his work ethic, his character, his ability. And I can't speak higher of a former teammate. James and AJ Hawk are in a different tier than everybody else I ever played with. So, but he talked about, I really developed a great relationship with James. He's a Buckus winner. He's everything I want to be. He was a draft pick, played a long time in the NFL, a good family man, like really glowing praise. And I think that's something that, frankly, we need an injection of on the defensive side of the ball, because I think that we've got some guys that aren't A+ recruiters, and I think James is an A+ recruiter.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on Peyton Pierce Bank going forward, and I love the Ohio State jerseys. He went here for his high school uni, but your thoughts on him going forward?
Yeah, I was told the same information, that he's been recruited by Jim Knowles here for the past couple months, and Ohio State was kind of in that one, but kind of behind Notre Dame and Oklahoma and maybe a couple others. Well, from what I was told, and it mirrors what the Rivals guy was told by Peyton himself, is I now am taking Ohio State now and making them probably. I think I'm moving them up ahead of every. I think they're the favorite to get him. Now I'm not calling it, not a crystal ball pick, but I'm saying, if I had a gun to my head right now, I think Ohio State's going to get Peyton Pierce. I've watched film before. I love the kid. And when you're sitting there right now on signing day with no linebackers signed, zero, that ain't good. Zero's not good. And I look at Notre Dame signed 3 linebackers in this 2023 class. 2 of them I would take right now, no questions asked. The third I think's got a chance to be a pretty good player. So I'm not saying I would take all 3, but when you're sitting there with 0, maybe you would take any of the 3. You got nothing right now. So, and James is not allowed to go on the road. He's, and I also, I should add this. I was also told by someone who's very close to Al Golden. Al Golden is a Notre Dame DC and linebacker coach, that Al Golden hated to see James Laurinaitis leave Notre Dame. He loves him. He thinks, like you said, future head coach someday. But before we get to that, he needs to be on the field, full-time position coach, future DC is how Al Golden talked about James. And that's also where I got the information about Peyton Pierce, that relationship is strong. And Al Golden he's a heck of a coach, doesn't really like to recruit all that much. So those 3 linebackers that Notre Dame signed in this class, as much James Laurinaitis or more than Al Golden. So James is stud. Could be the defensive heartline, in my opinion. But you got to turn him loose. You got to make him full-time somehow. Figure it out. Make him full-time. Get him on the road. Don't have him recruit against Bama and Georgia, if we're still doing that, with one hand tied behind his back. Let the boy go. Let him go. And there's no way they have 10 assistant coaches that are better recruiters than what he'll be, even though he's never done it before. If I'm rolling dice with James Laurinaitis in the casino. He's my dude. So get him on the road. I don't care how you do it. I would wait for the NCAA to vote another coach allowed on the road. I'm not waiting for that vote. I'm getting him out there tomorrow. Somehow, there's a way. There is a way. And I would have James Laurinaitis on the trail. When you talked about him on the trail earlier, he's not on the trail. He's locked to the campus. Well, not my campus, he wouldn't be.
And it's as a guy that I literally was James Laurinaitis for 2 years of my life, it is extremely frustrating when you have relationships with kids. Like I had a great relationship with Ethan Posick, who went to LSU. Was a second round pick of the Seahawks. Actually played center for the Browns this year. Really great kid from Chicago. I got to know his parents really well. But when you don't get to go on the road, you can't really solidify it. You can't see him. You can't.
You're not in the high school.
Yeah,
you're not in the high school talking to the coach, letting the kids see you that you're interested. And then when it comes down to, you get to the point of home visits, that's where you work your magic, is in that living room with the parents and grandma and the kid and his sister and his girl. He can't do that. James can't do that. James can't go on a home visit. Well, he would for me.
For me, I would figure out a way to get it done by May. May is generally
what's today? February 1?
February 2.
I get it done by February 2 or 3.
Yeah. I mean,
you want to win or you don't. It's it's important to you or it's a hobby. This guy is a better recruiter. He wouldn't be the number 11 recruiter if I ranked him 1 through 11, and I know you wouldn't either. We wouldn't have him at 11.
Where would you, in curiosity, say they shift Parker Fleming to an analyst and they make James the number 10 guy?
Which I would do, still pay him same amount of money.
Yep.
Still love him, still need him, still want him. But I think James would have more of an impact on this program on the road than Parker Fleming would. But I still want Parker Fleming, and I still want to pay him, and he's important to me. But James would be more important as a recruiter.
For me, with James, like April 17th would be my day, because that's the first day they can go back on the road, because they're off the road until after spring football.
Okay.
That's why. So that's why, like, they're dead now, and then they start spring ball early March, February, completely dead. So April 17th is when they could hit the road. That's why they used to, like with Tressel, they used to have the spring game in like late April, and then Urban moved it up to the 15th because he's like, well, you missed 2 weeks of being on the road if you have it in late April because you're practicing spring ball.
Yeah, you're cutting into the spring evaluation phase, and that's true. Yeah, James can't go on the road now. Signing day is today, so. Yeah, you can't. So that's good. You've got some time to work it. So make it work.
But yeah, if I was ranking offhand, I mean, I don't know if I'd put him lower than 2 behind Brian, because I'm just telling you, when James walks into a high school, his charisma, his name. I know you interviewed him, and when you interviewed him, you're like,
I was so impressed by him. He didn't know me at the time, and I had interviewed him right when the time he committed to Ohio State. And when I saw him, like, after he's already a superstar at Ohio State, he went to BJ Payne's deal. He went to his high school. It was like an autograph signing thing in a camp. And, I went up to him, just introduced myself and said, you won't remember me. I interviewed you. Oh, yeah, I remember you. And we talked, and I walked away thinking, this guy's unbelievable. I mean, he's a guy that he makes you feel better about yourself after the conversation's over, and that's what recruiting's all about. Recruiting is salesmanship. You're selling Lamborghinis, you're selling encyclopedias door to door, you're selling insurance. It's salesmanship, and I did it for years, so I know I know the difference between a good salesman and a bad salesman. He'd be a great salesman. I mean, he could be the defensive Brian Hartline.
Easily. And that's why I was so disappointed when we didn't just hire him last year. And I get we wanted to bring in.
Though, I didn't realize, that's my bad on me. They can't go on the road for a while now. So they have time. They have time to make it work, and they're smart. Ryan Day's super smart. Mark Pantoni's super smart. They'll figure this out. So, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. That is amazing. That you wouldn't do you any good to do it today anyway. So you've got some time to figure things out and make it work. And you've got time to see if the NCAA somehow votes on this and makes it happen before then. So good point by you. Good by you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I lived the calendar bank when I was a grad assistant for Urban. It was like February was the most miserable month of the entire year, because we were in staff meetings for 10 hours a day, and they were like, it wasn't like sit there and sip your. It was like Urban just whipping us unrelentingly, which I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, because like everybody would be in there just like, like on the like your fingernails raking on the desk because Urban would be cold calling you, and it was nuts. And then, March, April, spring ball, which was like every day was like Full Metal Jacket with Urban. So then, when we got to May, the coaches were all on the road, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, oh, what do I got to do? I got to do some self scout today, a little coffee, get a little workout in. So like when you're a GA in May, there isn't really a lot for you to do other than a bunch of stupid projects. Like you scout like the first 4 opponents, you can get all that done in a week. So, I mean, there's a lot. It's not like being out now, when you're a top 10 coach, you're on that road. You leave Sunday night, man, and you get home either Friday night or Saturday morning. So you are grinded in May. But when you're a GA, it is like, man, I get to go work out and do some projects and, work out with the kids.
Have you watched this film of this kid?
I've seen it a few times. I've ran through it.
I've seen things I haven't seen before. This is not the highlight film I saw. You know who this kid reminds me of?
Who?
Tommy Eichenberg is a high school player.
Oh, that was your guy, man. He came through for you last year.
Yeah, I mean, I pushed for that kid to be offered and screamed about it, and even when he's committed to Boston College. This is how Tommy played in high school. They played him in space a lot. But you could see he was going to fill out. Tommy was going to be a Mike or a Sam, depending how this kid's playing outside now, and he's string beamish, but he's going to get bigger.
This is some sophomore tape. I'm going to get some junior tape downloaded.
Yeah,
this is his sophomore highlight reel.
I know he's bigger now. This is good, though.
Yeah,
he reminds me of Tommy. When Tommy was a younger high school player, this is what he looked like.
What did you think of Liam Eichenberg?
Loved him.
Oh, God.
Loved him.
I love that kid. I worked him out. I've known Liam since he was a junior in high school.
Who was with him? Was it Tommy Kramer in that class, too?
I
think they were in the same class. I think he was in the class with Tommy Kramer.
Yeah. And like Liam was the kid that I knew him, and I worked him out at St. Ignatius High School. When I was literally in sales, and I was in Cleveland, and the head of my company said his son played at Ignatius and said, hey, can you work my son out and his buddy Liam? And I didn't know who Liam was. And I worked that kid out. And as soon as I got off the field, I called Mark Pantoni. I'm like, look, you got to offer this kid. He is unbelievable. He's really good. He's huge. He's like 6'6".
Yeah, they offered him before I'd ever heard of him. They offered him.
Yeah. And, he got drafted 2nd round by the Dolphins, played left tackle for Notre Dame. But I watched that kid, and he reminded me of Taylor Decker a lot. And I was like, he's probably better than Taylor in high school, honestly. And he, went 2nd round, and he's starting for the Dolphins now.
This Peyton Pierce, like I say, so this is his sophomore film then.
Yep.
Okay.
Wildcat, but no, he's a fluid dude, man. They put him out on the edge of pass rush. Here he is in space.
No, he's athletic, and that was the thing with Tommy Eichenberg is people hadn't seen him as much as I had. I saw him a ton. And they thought he was a little stiff and just a prototype Mike run stopper. And it's like, no, he can cover. And he's good in space. He can blitz. I mean, you run wide, he's going to get you. You run up the middle, he gets you. You pass, he gets you. You drop him in coverage, he's going to intercept the ball. He blocks punts. I mean, Tommy was so athletic, and people really missed the boat on him, on Tommy.
Yeah.
And I was screaming about him for forever. And, it took a long time for them to offer him to see what they needed to see. But, man, I was sold on Tommy when he was, young. And this kid reminds me of what I saw on Tommy Eichenberg, at a very early age.
Well, and again, that's the thing that's going to be interesting is when we do our next Phil Steele interview is Tommy's going to be preseason first-team All-American. I mean, if you finish the year as the second-team All-American on every team, and then you return, you're going to be preseason first team. So it's like that's a good call by you, man, because it's hard to pick out a kid that isn't. It's easy to pick out Jadeveon Clowney and some of these guys, but when it's Tommy Eichenberg, and you're like, man, I really like this man. He really can float. He's quick.
You really had to see him. You really had to see him more than just watching his highlight tape. It didn't come across. You had to see him a lot, and I saw him a ton because I like seeing him, and they had a bunch of guys on his team that I needed to cover, and their schedule was so high-powered that I needed to see a lot of the teams they were playing. So I probably saw more of Tommy Eichenberg than, anybody other than Chuck Kyle. I mean, he wasn't a guy that flashed. You know what I mean? We saw
Yeah.
Shamar Stewart at camp, and
Oh
you only
God.
needed to see 2 reps, right? Or you
Yeah.
just need to see him walk out of the locker room is all you really need to see. See him stretch, and you were sold.
Yeah.
Tommy wasn't that kind of guy. Tommy, you needed to see full game and more than one full game. And then over time, it was like, this is not a stiff run stopper that you only can play on first and second down. This kid can do everything, you know. So, you know, like my dad said, a broken clock's right twice a day. So I got that one right. But yeah, I was screaming for Ohio State to offer him for a year before they offered him.
Hey, man,
Yeah, and that's what this kid reminds me of Tommy. This kid reminds me because he's going to get bigger and keep that athleticism, and then you got to force. So
yeah, that's everything you want.
That's my final thought. I like Peyton Pierce.
Man, well, Bank, this has been fantastic. Any final thoughts? Signing day is wrapped. It wasn't much of a signing day. You got the chat tomorrow. Any final thoughts? Any more things you want to talk about as we wrap this thing up for the night?
No, not really. My next project is going to try to dig into NIL and just kind of see, you know, how the different collectives are at Georgia, at Bama, at some of those schools, how they do it compared to how Ohio State does it. I really don't know. And at Miami, where why does everybody across the country know John Ruiz with Miami? I don't know who's the Bama guy. I don't know. Who's the Georgia guy? I don't know. You know what I mean? Why?
Yeah.
It's got to be more than just having a rich guy at the top. Has to be more than that. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I want to dig into further into NIL to really lift the hood at some of these other places and look under the hood and see how it's being done. Because I'm kind of ignorant to NIL, the under the hood stuff. You know, looking at the sport plugs. You know, that's what I want to do.
I think that's fascinating. And, you know, another thing that's like something I kind of want to research now that it's going to be a little bit of a different time with recruiting being done is how many of these kids in the portal that get NIL deals actually pan out, you know, because that's like the big thing is like, you know, when we miss on a guy, must have got an NIL deal. And does he actually turn into a star? Because obviously, you know, this corner we just signed is a fantastic player. And, you know, up until he committed, man, I was like, God, you know, he's in the Tennessee directory. Tennessee's paying people you know, like it's going out of style. Like,
I mean, this kid will be the number one. He'll be your number one corner next year. Burke be 2 or Hancock or whoever this kid's the number one dude. And he's, you know, I had an SEC coach tell me about him that they thought they recruited him and lost him, you know, to Ole Miss, but they look at him as a potential 3-and-out guy. And they thought, you know, in his first year, he just got thrown out there. I mean, and didn't really know what he was doing and got better and better all year. And they were like, man, we wish we'd have got this guy. And, you know, the school I talked to loved him. They love the kid. And they think he's, you know, top of the chart NFL dude. So big get for Ohio State there. Big get. He starts. He's their number one corner. And, you know, he's your lockdown guy, takes the number ones.
Oh, I can't wait to see him in action. That'll be great in the spring. So, well, Bank, I appreciate you, my man. I'm going to wrap this thing up. Great hour. Good Lord, that goes fast. Bank Greene, bringing it as always. Just a fantastic presence on our message board. We have the Bill the Bank Greene legendary Thursday chat. Tomorrow, it goes all day. It's the best day of the week for me. Thursday is always my favorite day because it's bank day. Ton of information. We're going to get to some of the questions. Like Alan Clark, I'm going to get Nevada in here. I'm going to shut this stream down. So if you guys want to jump back in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to come back with Nevada for another solid hour. Take some signing day questions. Alan Clark, it's interesting. That's the guy that Nevada broke about 2 weeks ago. The Scoop said that he was coming, and today he was announced formally. So, again, if you're on the Scoop, you knew that was coming, and it wasn't a surprise. So we appreciate you guys all tuning in. Thank you for joining in with Bill the Bank Greene. Fantastic show tonight. As always, if you could leave us a like on the way out the door, those are huge for us. You guys have no idea how much that influences the YouTube algorithm, so they really help us out a lot when you leave a like. So thank you so much for that. Write in your comments which member of the 2023 class is your favorite guy. Is it Ennis? Is it Tate? Is it a hidden gem? Is it Luke Montgomery? There's some really, really strong names in here. Is it an under the radar guy? Who's the guy that you think could pop off and be, maybe an underrated guy when we look back in 3 or 4 years and say, man, I can't believe how low that guy was rated. So put that down in the comments below. We appreciate you guys as always. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review. Those are huge for us. Click subscribe. Again, we appreciate you guys. So again, we'll be back in about 10 minutes or so. So thank you, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. And thank you, Sue. Appreciate you for always being on here. So we'll see you guys in about 10 minutes. Go Bucks.